Hi, welcome to my series on first-party data strategy. I'm Pete Neeson, and in this episode, we're going to be exploring why every brand needs a first-party data strategy. So why is it that every brand needs a first-party data strategy? Well, in the 2020s, first-party data will be the key to growth. Your first-party data asset will determine not only your relevance, but success in the 2020s digital marketplace. Now that's a bold statement, and I don't expect you to fully agree at this point. But in this episode and in the following series, I'm going to share some of the top reasons why you should be focusing on that first-party data strategy, as well as some techniques for getting started and enriching that first-party data to become a truly valuable asset for your organization. So for the last 15 years, I've worked with over a quarter of the Fortune 500 companies and many smaller organizations as well. So I'm going to be sharing through the lens of executives and the leadership teams with those medium to large size corporations. But I do expect a lot of this information will be very relevant to smaller organizations. You may just have to adapt and scale some of the recommendations and practices. In particular, CMOs and CDOs should pay attention because there's going to be a lot of this series that is explored through your lens particularly, because those are the officers that I'm most frequently working with. So before I dive into the reasons, let's start with a first-party data definition. First-party data is the data that your customers share and your brand collects. We're going to start with this basic definition. We will add to it as this series progresses. But more importantly than the definition is how first-party data is useful. I really like to think of first-party data as the way that you know your customers in the digital marketplace. And as marketers, as salespeople, and as executives, we all know that knowing your customer is really the key to success. And you don't necessarily just have to take my word for it on this. The first-party data asset is increasingly showing up on balance sheets. That's because investors and shareholders and boards alike are seeing this as a leading indicator of how well a brand knows its customers, an indicator of the health of that brand, as well as one of the leading predictors of future growth. So, first-party data, it doesn't build and enrich itself. Brands really have to prioritize this, and in particular, executives need to focus on this and build a strategy so that that asset it builds over time and becomes an investment that you can continually draw on. Well, executives and leaders of organizations are very busy, a lot on your plate. So what I'm going to do is use this episode to share what I think are the top 5 reasons that first-party data strategy should be at the top of your list. Let's take a look at reason number 1, the digital marketplace. So we're now in a digital marketplace. It happened, the tipping point was 2020, and though pundits are predicting that this is going to happen for a while, most of them were pushing it off a little more into the future. But as we moved through the dot-com boom and the rise of e-commerce and this mobile revolution and the transition to social spaces and AI, all of these things were building to allow and enable the digital marketplace to take over. And it is now the point where the digital marketplace and conducting business through digital pathways is the predominant way of doing business between customers and brands. Now that has a lot of implications for brands, and many of them are really positive. The first is that you should now have much more of a direct relationship with your customers. You should also be thinking about managing those relationships digital and conducting business in digital pathways. Now that doesn't mean that every aspect of your business is going to be digital and that things like brick and mortar stores go away or that dealerships go away or that there won't be in-person sales meetings. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you have to enable a digital path so that when those in-person or those brick and mortar experiences aren't possible or aren't preferred, that people can still do business with your brands. You can also now re-examine the relationships with intermediaries and middlemen because there is the expectation of that direct connection with the customer and there's the scale of the tools available in the digital marketplace. Brands can take a look at each one of those relationships and the flow of engaging customers and figure out, are they still adding value? Should we change the nature of that relationship or even eliminate that relationship? Things like needing to place ads through ad networks in the past or needing large dealer distributor networks just to get products out to customers, those are things that can be reconsidered in the digital marketplace. And the leaders who are going through transformations and realizing a ton of gain, not only from their first-party first-party data asset, but from the digital marketplace, they're not just trying to recreate their old non-digital practices in this digital marketplace. They're rethinking the flow entirely to save costs, to bring efficiency, and increase customer retention. So in the digital marketplace, we're starting to see, hopefully, that first-party data is a necessity. First-party data provides insights, it helps set priorities, and it defines direction for the organization. Let's go ahead and look at reason number 2, the experience economy. Now, as we move past the service economy and into more of an experience-based economy, the things that people and customers in general care about, they're changing. They want to spend less time in the buying process, less time deciding, and more time doing. In short, customers and businesses, they're going to engage with brands that make doing business easy and productive. Decisions are going to be made about the overall experience in addition to things like price and feature set. So we have to make sure that we're delivering good experiences and helping customers reach their goals, because that's when they're going to decide to continue to engage with the brand and to repeatedly engage with the brand. Now, people make decisions these days more in the moment, in the flow of those experiences. And since those experiences are increasingly becoming digital, your brand really needs to be present in those digital moments to make sure that you're able to engage and improve the experience. I'll share one example that we're probably all fairly familiar with, which is airline travel. Now, many people start out and they can be price sensitive and they're looking for, the most economical ticket. But when they're in the moment and in the airport, the decision to upgrade, get a little bit more comfortable seat, get something that makes their flight a bit more enjoyable, they're in that experience, and more they're wanting to make the choice in that moment to go ahead and upgrade. And I've worked with a client recently in the airline industry, and they've noticed about a 7% increase in upsell when they're able, through their app, to offer those experiences in a timely moment to let people know that there's an upgrade or a flight change available. Now, those are some good reasons why you need to be present in the moment and be thinking about the experience as well. But there's other things to consider in the experience economy. Brands really must start to think about and adopt new metrics. The metrics that we've been using for a while, they're not as in the moment and they're not as experience-based as they need to be. So you need to think about those new metrics. And we're going to dive more deeply into this in a later session. But some general guidelines here. Start to think about the metrics of flow versus just clicks and behavior itself. Are people moving across and through an experience to a goal, and are you able to measure their flow through that? Another thing to consider here is, can you take all of your metrics and elevate them up into how they tie to customer lifetime value? Again, a big topic, we'll cover it a little bit more in depth later, but if you think about those two guiding principles, think about re-examining some of the metrics that you're spending so much time trying to measure and capture, and think about what you're going to need for this new experience economy. Now, there's also a cultural shift that has to happen within organizations to really value that data, because that's your investment and your source of growth in the future. And just going after the short-term sale sometimes isn't always the right move when you can also enrich an experience and capture more data that's going to lead to significantly more sales in the future. Using that data to examine and improve experiences also needs to be part of that cultural shift. And all of this is going to help you build that digital trust, which is really expected in experiences these days in the experience economy. The good news for brand is there's so much value that can be added, insights gained, and trust built when we start to focus on how we're delivering overall experiences versus individual campaigns or individual shopping carts. We want to open up that growth by thinking about the broader experience itself, driving retention and customer lifetime value. Now, in the experience economy, first-party data is going to help brands answer questions. It's going to help brands learn, react, and deliver value to those experiences. So what first-party data should be answering at the very highest level is knowing what your customers value. And individual customers will value different things, and brands need to be able to know that at an individual level. You also want to know if customers are reaching their goal. If they're abandoning journeys before reaching their goal, you want to start to know where and why. Those are some of the new metrics that first-party data will help you look into, and the insights that can be provided once you capture that data and use it. Where and when your customers are making critical decisions is another answer that first-party data and insight that first-party data can bring as well. Where in that flow of the experiences are they deciding to make that seat upgrade, that additional purchase, that accessory? Those are the sorts of things that your brand needs to know and have more value than just the individual sale itself. Okay, let's move on to reason number 3, urgency and imperatives. So there's several imperatives and urgency drivers for why a brand should develop and execute a first-party data strategy. I generally find those imperatives fall into 3 categories. There's technology imperatives, societal and cultural imperatives, and competitive imperatives. The urgency is different for each of these imperatives, but they all have a ticking clock associated with them. In the technology space, most of us are familiar at this point that cookies are going away and Apple has changed its privacy defaults. More of these changes are coming from the third parties that we need to deal with in order to access customers. There's cultural changes, though, in terms of how people think about privacy, security, trust, and transparency. And as those changes come, corporations are going to have to react to that. The third bucket there is competitive changes. And as walled gardens get higher walls and customer access becomes more difficult and more expensive, brands need to start thinking about reducing that dependency. So those supply chain and market agility factors also come into play here when we think about competitive. The last year or so has been really informative in terms of what COVID can do to the supply chain and market demand. But changes like this in a global economy and in a digital marketplace, they're going to continue to happen at a rapid pace. Hopefully not nearly as severely as they have in the last year, but brands need to be prepared for this, and first-party data helps. Overall, first-party data strategy can broadly help with all of them in the following ways. First, reducing that third-party customer access dependency, right? If you're dependent on walled gardens that keep getting higher, well, then your costs are going to keep going up. Becoming more agile and being able to rapidly adjust to cultural changes around privacy concerns and security standards, those are things that brands are going to need to be able to react to. And first-party data can help you really get ahead of those in terms of who your customers are and what they care about. Can also reduce risk with first-party data strategy by reducing dependency overall on those third parties. And that's an important part of a first-party data strategy, is considering that. In general, when we think about these urgency and imperative drivers, what we need to do is think about first-party data is one of those single investments that a brand can make that is going to help in this rapidly changing marketplace, and is pretty much a sure bet that investing in it will help you grow over time, regardless of the changes that come from cookies and privacy and the cultural and the marketplace changes. Okay, reason number 4, growth and scale, something all brands are interested in. Now, the digital marketplace and experience economy really opens up a lot of opportunities for both growth and scale. But first-party data as an asset, as a potential balance sheet asset as an organization, needs to perform the function of both driving growth, but also helping to manage costs. As brands reach out to new geographies, new customers, and start to offer new products and services, they need to manage these two costs, the access to customer cost and the cost to serve. And first-party data will help you not only rethink those experiences, but some of those intermediaries that are involved and the value that they bring, and helps you to manage these and deliver better experiences. Now, what brands must do is they've got to control those scale costs, and they want to focus on growing the margin by doing so. Implementing self-service digital paths will certainly help with this and is something that is going to be required over time. And actively prioritizing first-party access to customers. So using your email, your chat, mobile, text, all of those things as first priorities versus going through third parties will really help to manage some of those costs. And that will also help start to break the cost center model of marketing that so many brands are involved with and move towards more of an investment model of marketing. Let's take a quick look. Here's 2 graphs, and these were graphs that are recently prepared for an actual client I was working with in the food distribution business. And we were looking at over the next 10 years what they would look like for growth with and without first-party data. And with first-party data answering questions around where the real value was and how they could manage costs, what you'll see here is even holding the growth the same, the margin was eaten away by not having that first-party data. So your brand may gain a lot of growth, hopefully, in the digital economy, but without first-party data helping you manage that cost to access and cost to serve, it may come at an unnecessary sacrifice to margin. So in the growth and scale reason for why first-party data strategy is so important, we're looking to provide insights and prioritize opportunities and manage costs. And first-party data should be providing you a ton of insights in both of those areas. Okay, we've come to reason number 5, customer lifetime value. And this is a big one, and it's going to get its own session dedicated to it. But let's go over some of the high points here. First-party data unlocks customer lifetime value in a way that was not technically possible until now. In fact, customer lifetime value really requires first-party data in order to establish what that baseline customer lifetime value is, in order to measure and monitor it and grow it. And customer lifetime value, it's been chased after for a long time. It's been a holy grail. But by building a first-party data platform and growing that first-party data asset, it unlocks customer lifetime value. Customer lifetime value is also something that can be measured and monitored in real time, because your customers in digital experiences are giving you those real-time signals of potential growth for customer lifetime value and potential attrition. And you have to be listening through your first-party data platform for that. We can then start to use customer lifetime value as a real-time metric. And that should be pretty exciting, hopefully to marketers at least. Now, what brands must do in order to be able to really establish and capture customer lifetime value? You need to understand and build those initial customer lifetime value models with your first-party data. And then you've got to really enforce that cultural value of prioritizing data and long-term customer lifetime value versus short-term sales. Using then that culture to start adopting and steering with customer lifetime value metrics is important for an organization as you mature into your first-party data capabilities. First-party data and customer lifetime value insights, they shouldn't be outsourced. These are things that your organization needs to know and own integrally. They should be part of your institutional knowledge that doesn't change with agencies and isn't held by someone else that you have to pay to access. This is an asset that needs to be owned by your brand. Lastly, organizations really need to start to use this first-party data and their customer lifetime value models to start building propensity models. When customers behave a certain way, it's indicating this, and we should react this way. Those propensity models are what happens in customer lifetime value organizations that have matured. They have these propensity models which allow them to start reacting in real time and really favor growing customer lifetime value in a systematic way. So with first-party data, we can help establish customer lifetime value, monitor it, and grow. We can look for those signals in real time of potential growth and attrition. Now, I had an interesting conversation with the CMO recently, and we were discussing how customer lifetime value as a metric for an organization, it really opens up long-term thinking again that hasn't been around for a while. It helps us value that long-term relationship in a way that wasn't quantifiable in the past very easily. And it really starts to deprecate the thinking of just going after short-term conversions. And building first-party data as a long-term asset and enriching it and protecting it over time is something that hopefully is exciting to a lot of executives, specifically marketers, because it allows you to put in place longer-term programs and execute longer-term strategies instead of just year-over-year churn in terms of rebudgeting and reclimbing that same hill you climbed again last year. So I hope you get as excited about customer lifetime value as an important reason for driving a first-party data strategy. Okay, so we've made it through our 5 reasons why first-party data strategy is so important. Let me just quickly share with you some of the barriers that I see to first-party data progress. The main reason is because of the confusion, the noise, the jargon, the shiny objects that exist right now. There's a lot of that in the marketplace when it comes to technologies, strategies, ideas, metrics, and we have to be able to sort through that. We will explore a lot of these and put them into context of their value to first-party data assets in the rest of this series, but let me give you a for instance. One of the biggest ones that I see as a challenge for a lot of marketers right now is going after, say, campaign attribution or NPS score. Well, these are important because that's how we've measured things in the past, and that's how you can sort of justify budgets and also show your contribution. But things like NPS score, that's a trailing metric about attitude, and it doesn't really help us in the real-time digital marketplace where people want to give us feedback in the moment and in their experiences. So we need to start thinking about transitioning away to more useful metrics. Campaign attribution is also one of those things that we've, as marketers, have gone after for years because we need to show how we've contributed to the overall growth of the brand. But when we think about just zeroing in our metrics to a single campaign attribution, we sort of miss the forest through the trees here and think about we're trying to grow customer lifetime value overall. We're trying to grow that first-party data asset. And it's not necessarily that important to spend all the time, all the energy, and all the effort to be able to say how much one particular email campaign contributed. Because in the digital marketplace, all your channels need to work together. Your email needs to coordinate with your mobile, it needs to coordinate with your website. So trying to attribute to those individual channels, it becomes a way to mire down marketers. And my favorite that mires down organizations as a whole, not just marketers, is this idea of single source of truth, golden record, 360-degree view. These are important and there are worthy pursuits going after it. But what I see most often with organizations is it causes them to get paralyzed. Instead of putting together an incremental strategy that helps them move forward with the data that they have, they sort of pause and they go into a big experiment where they try and connect all the data sources and form that single source of truth in order to move forward. What I've seen be more successful with organizations is understanding that single source of truth is something that you work towards, and it's an ongoing process. It's not a single destination. You're always going to have more data sources, and you're always going to need to bring new technology into place. But more importantly, you need to change culture and operations to value populating, protecting, and enriching that first-party data source. So we won't explore all the words in this little cloud here, but understanding that sorting through that noise and confusion is really important. I'm going to try and save you some hours by doing that in these episodes, helping you understand that incremental change versus transformation, it could be your enemy here. Because if in 18 months you've just built a better email program or incorporated some marketing automation, you're going to have missed out on a lot of those imperatives that we've talked about, and it's going to mean that first-party data is more expensive and more difficult to get. Another thing that should be considered here, and is usually a barrier for a lot of folks, is they're starting with technology first, and you should be starting with strategy first. Now, this probably makes good intuitive sense, but when we get busy with the day-to-day operations, sometimes, and we've got technology vendors showing up at our door, sometimes we forget, and we look at the shiny feature sets, and we adjust our strategy to fit those feature sets. Start forming a base strategy for your first-party data and then evaluate a technology's capabilities against being able to deliver that versus the reverse, because it leads to disappointment when you start with what can a technology do and then how will I deploy it versus what do I need to do for my brand and building that first-party data asset, and is this technology capable of helping me with that? Let's take a quick look at the dynamic between the digital marketplace, customer experience, personalization, and first-party data. As we've established in the digital marketplace and in the experience economy, your path and your engagement is largely going to be digital going forward. And that's the area of investment for brands going forward because there's the biggest growth there and the biggest potential for scale. Knowing that digital engagement and digital experiences are where you're going to be focused, improving those customer experiences is about improving those digital customer experiences. And there's plenty of research that indicates how important customer experience is to driving conversion and retention and brand loyalty. And you should be focused on it. But let's understand we can't really improve digital customer experiences without bringing some level of personalization. Being able to individualize not just the message that goes out, not just putting somebody's name in there or a custom offer, but personalize the experience, the path overall to helping someone reach the goal is really important. And we can't really do that personalization without data. Data is what tells us about those individuals, tells us what's important, tells us where they currently are in their journey, what they care about, and that all really comes down to first-party data is the most important and richest source of data. So you use your first-party data in order to perform personalization and make great customer experiences and build digital engagement. If we understand that dynamic, sometimes it helps sort through the noise. All right, we're wrapping up this episode. So here's a quick preview of upcoming topics in the series. You know, this is just a suggested order. You can obviously move through them in any order you choose. Now, if you're like me at this point, you might be saying to yourself, free content on the internet, what's this guy trying to sell? And before you invest any more time, let me share a little disclaimer and disclosure here. I'm not going to be pushing any technology. I'm not going to mention any technologies by name. I'm not here to push any particular brands. I want to help you formulate your strategy and understand at the capability level what you're going to need to do and help set that strategy so that you can evaluate partners and technology well. My motivations are personal. I value data privacy and security, and for myself, my family, my neighbors, my pets, and all of you. So that's why I want corporations to get better at this. If anything, I'm selling this agenda that corporations have the capability and the responsibility to set high standards for first-party data. And I'm hoping that sharing my knowledge and the experience I've had working with other large corporations going through growing pains, that it's going to benefit everybody moving through this quicker, raise the bar, and keep us all happily engaged in the digital marketplace. Okay, as promised, here's the teaser for the next episode, the 4 essentials in getting started with a first-party data strategy. We're going to cover how to choose executive champions and what executive champions need to know. We'll talk about operational strategy and how to operationalize the data cycle. Then we're going to dive into first-party data platforms and what strategy you should have in pulling together your platform. And then last but not least is a first-party data maturity plan. This sort of ties together all the components so that you can communicate it to the organization and gives you a stepwise path to mature. Thanks so much for paying attention. I hope you found this valuable. If you did find this valuable, please feel free to share. There's an email address here if you have any questions. Until the next episode, be well.